Welcome to Founder Stories, where we dive into the journeys of cybersecurity leaders, from first-time founders to industry veterans. Each story reveals the passion, resilience, and problem-solving spirit that drives innovation forward. Whether it's tackling financial challenges, conquering regulations, or building great company culture, these founders have insights and advice that inspire. Let's hear their stories. Howdy, folks. It's Alan Alford here, host of Founder Stories TV, and I am interviewing Raj Mallempati today. He is the CEO of BlueFlag Security. BlueFlag secures developer identities, tools, and code throughout the SDLC. Now, Raj is in his first formal role as a CEO founder. And for a bit of a personal note, Raj has actually climbed to the Mount Everest base camp, which is pretty darn cool. His goal is to climb the tallest peaks in each continent if possible. Another fun Raj fact is that even though he is great at assembling companies and assembling teams, he is not so great at assembling IKEA furniture, which, come on, I think we can all relate to. Raj, thank you so much for joining us here at Founder Stories.
Absolutely a pleasure to meet you, Alan.
All right, so let's dive into this. We're trying to educate the community of folks who are thinking about becoming founders, those who just want to know what it's like. There's practitioners who just don't understand the other side of the fence. So I got a series of questions for you that'll kind of help tease out some of that stuff from your experience, and we'll hopefully educate these folks and get something really fun going here. What is an obstacle you faced when you first became a founder that you would not have predicted? Something you did not predict that you just ran right into?
Yeah, so I think the biggest obstacle, which I certainly didn't think I would face, is actually hiring the initial team, right? And the reason I say that is because when you hire the initial team, typically what you want to do is hire a strong technical team because you want to build the product, right? So I got that piece right. But one of the key challenges was to also get, sort of build up the product team, build up like at least the initial set of prospects and customers, right? So I would say that the whole notion of getting the engineering team was right? But then again, starting to think about how to evolve the product in a rapid fashion, and hence getting like folks who can actually roll up the sleeves and actually talk to the CISOs, talk to customers. We actually had some challenges early on in terms of getting that right? So that was a mixed bag, but learned pretty quickly how to actually then right-size the team.
I like that a lot. And it ties into another question I wanted to ask you. You know, there's this trope that in a startup, everyone wears many hats, right? That if you're a CEO, you're also a CTO, CPO, head of sales, et cetera, et cetera. So if everyone's wearing lots of hats, and you guys probably started with two founders, right? A CEO and a CTO?
Yes.
That okay? So that's like your kind of your pretty standard pattern there.
Yeah.
What's your next big hire at the executive level? Like, who do you go to next? Do you get a CRO? Do you get a CMO? Do you get it like? Well, what's kind of your progression through that? You got folks that wear multiple hats, and you want each one to wear multiple hats. But what do you look for, and kind of what's the primary skill set for the next few hires?
Yeah. So in our case, actually, there were two critical hires that we hired right up front, right? So one of them was actually a VP of engineering, right? So my CTO, Ken Schneider, is a phenomenal CTO, but at the same time, he also has some great contacts within the industry, right? So what we ended up doing is saying, look, it's more critical for both myself and for Ken to be out there getting feedback from customers or prospects, getting and sort of making a lot of noise and sort of evangelizing the company, right? So the first two hires were somebody who can actually sort of run the engineering team and build the product. And then the second one, which is actually typically not something that most founders do, was pretty much from like the first couple of months, we actually invested in hiring a VP of customer success. Now, that's typically not something that most founders do. And the thesis was pretty simple, right? You got to go build a product and hence build the right engineering and product team. But at the same time, because you're recruiting design customers, by definition, early stages, you want somebody who can focus on making sure those design customers' needs are heard. And at the same time, you're actually starting to build confidence with the design customers so they can become paying customers as fast as possible, right? So
Sure.
most founders don't think about investing in a customer success team so early in the overall process. But again, based on my previous company's experience at Cloud Knox, I decided to invest in a customer success super early. And you'll notice I didn't talk about hiring a CRO. I didn't talk about
Yeah.
hiring anybody in the marketing side, right? But
Yeah.
fundamentally, the first, I continue to believe the first dozen customers, call them design customers, are super critical for the success of a company. And that's sort of what
Sure.
we did there.
That's a brilliant approach. That's a really interesting approach. I haven't heard someone do that before, and the logic is there. Like it makes perfect sense to me. Next question along those lines is the CFO. I've always wondered about this one. Do you start with a fractional CFO? Like at what point? I mean, because at some point you, the CEO, don't want to be fooling with the books, right? Like at some point you need somebody, and not only that, it's not just like, oh, get a payables receivables person, but I'm a full company. I got reporting stuff to deal with. I got boards, da, da, da. Like you need real financial oversight, not just doers. But so do you start with a fractional CFO? Do you bring one on pretty quickly? Like what did that work like?
Yeah, so my thesis again is right. You start really needing a fractional CFO probably about the time you're thinking about getting into a Series A conversation,
Mm,
right? So
okay.
before that, what you really need is somebody who can actually manage your books and then just do the balance sheet, et cetera, and then the taxes, et cetera, right? So right now, that's what we do. And then, as we start progressing towards, Series A, that's when we'll get a fractional CFO. And I'm pretty positive as we go along our
Mhm.
Series A journey and closer to a Series B, that's when we'll get a full-time CFO. And just to be clear, right, and again, goes back to the earlier question, right? My expectation is that our CFO will wear multiple hats, right?
Yeah.
So they're the whole, G and A. They manage the whole, like not just finance, but also the G and A of the entire company.
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
Driving the goals and establishing
absolutely.
like, guys, if you don't do X, it's going to look like Y.
Yeah,
Yeah, that kind of that strategic oversight is so required. I think and I like your A series approach. I think that's really clever. I'll skip asking about a CRO because I think we've covered enough on the hiring. Right, we could go down that road too. But all right, let's
absolutely.
let's switch gears. Um, this is your first founder CEO role. You're obviously a veteran of the industry. You've done a lot of different things. Um, of all the ways that you can positively impact cybersecurity, like founder, what was the drive there? Like I'm going to become a founder, and that's how I'm going to save the world of cybersecurity. Like walk me through that, physic.
Yeah. So actually, mine was actually a natural progression towards sort of, becoming a founder and a CEO, right? So just way of background, the previous company, right, was Cloud Knox, right? And so the CEO and the founder of Cloud Knox was a friend of mine, a colleague from VMware. We all worked together, right? So
Mm-hmm.
helped him in terms of the initial brainstorming, and then later on joined him as the COO and part of the founding team, right? So, and before that, I was in a slightly larger company or a set of companies, and then so the whole progression was large company, build up a business in it, go progressively smaller until I basically said, look, there's some huge opportunities in the developer security world, unmet
Mm-hmm.
needs, right? Perfect time to actually become a founder and start the company, right? So
Tackle
that
that
was
problem.
my journey. It was honestly, it was literally a crawl, walk, run kind of approach towards
Mm-hmm.
becoming a founder and a CEO.
I really like that. It's everyone has their own journey there, and it's always that's one of my favorite questions to ask is like, how did you get here? What what's why founder, right? And along those same lines, let's get a little personal with it. What do you personally get out of this? Like, what's the go home happy?
So for me, right, as cliche as it may sound, right, for me, the fun part about building up businesses is the building part, right? So for me, it's like, sort of what I get the most enjoyment and the most satisfaction is creating a new category, creating a new space, and then building up, for lack of better words, a business, right? And I use the word business because, look, you could do that something similar in a large company, or you can build a business by starting a small company, right, from scratch, right? So fundamentally, for me, that's what gives me joy, right? Creating a new category, creating a new business, right? And that's always been part of my journey, right? Way back when, almost like 15, 16 years ago, that's basically what I was doing at VMware, building up this whole thing called end user computing or virtual desktop infrastructure, right? That whole business there, right? And then in the previous role at CloudKnox, it was about building up the go-to market and then scaling the company. And here it is, building the product because there is some huge opportunity and a massive unmet need to actually sort of redefine the developer security market. What
Yeah.
And now look, I mean, I've got the keys to the sort of the kingdom, so to speak, and then I can drive this journey and make impact, right? So that's basically that's basically what I actually thought about doing, and that's basically the journey I'm on.
I love it. That's your go home happy.
Yeah,
So
I
so
mean,
the
yeah.
stereotype the stereotype is okay. That's the happy side of it. That you guys are all working 16-hour days. How real is that? Like how work life balance. Talk to me. What's really the story there?
So it's less about working 16 hours, right? Being not just being a founder and CEO, but also being part of the founding team. Right? What you constantly are thinking about is how do you evolve the company? How do you evolve the product? How do you evolve the go-to market, right? Because it's a series of small course corrections that you have to make, right? I mean, the conventional wisdom that startups pivot, while right, it's also wrong, right? We don't make a hard pivot left or right? It's a series of small little corrections that you make, which, and then again, if you take a step back, looks like a huge pivot, right? So my point again about that is it's not like we work 16 hours, but we are constantly thinking about the problem, constantly thinking about how to solve it from a product perspective, constantly thinking about how to actually solve it from a go-to-market perspective, right? So it's kind of like your brain is wired to actually continuously think about it, right? I mean, honestly, what I do to relax is I love to run. I love to bike, right? But then the interesting thing I tell people is I don't like to run with another person. I don't like to bike in a peloton, right? It's my solo time, right? When I'm
Ah,
running, that's when I'm thinking. Again, that's part of the 16 hours, right? But it's the
sure.
clarity I get, right? So, I mean, what I would say is that it's not like you work 16 hours. You're thinking
Yeah.
about how to solve the problem pretty much 16 hours, right?
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna push on that a little bit.
Haha.
You're at a cocktail party.
Yeah,
Here you are, the founder, and let's even say it's a Silicon Valley cocktail party. Everyone there is in the industry. You got investors and
yeah.
funders and VCs and CISOs and other founders and whatever is all going on, right? Can you can you turn off the awesomeness
Yep.
of I'm a founder and here's what we do and here's what we do? Like, is it can you go to a cocktail party and not be in founder mode? Is it possible?
So typically, actually, I do that, right? My rule of thumb is actually sort of even when I'm like, quote unquote, selling, right?
Yeah.
Fundamental belief is that, a human buys from another human, a human trusts another human, right? That's the fundamental thesis.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
that implies, especially if you sort of think about like CISOs like yourself, Alan, right? I mean, you are inherently taking a risk when you are actually working with the founder, with the startup, right? Because there are
Mm-hmm.
issues in the early days in terms of the
Yeah.
software, etc. Right? So
Yep.
the reason you will work with me is because you trust that I'm not going to go leave you hanging and dry, right? That's
Yeah.
that trust that has to be sort of built, right? It doesn't happen, right? So what
Yeah.
what happens typically there is when I'm going out to cocktail parties, right? My typical rule of thumb, and I tell this even to the other folks, right, the CISOs or whoever else I meet, is my rule of thumb is, can you sit on a beach and drink a beer talking about anything and everything, right? If
Yeah.
I pass the smell test and you pass the smell test, then we'll go talk business at a later point in time, right? So that's something that I
Beautiful.
do, right? A second thing that interesting thing that I've actually learned over the last 3 years is typically when I meet like somebody at a cocktail party, our second meeting, invariably, I literally ask them like, why don't we go out on a hike? Right? Literally, I go out on a hike for like 2, 3 hours with the
Nice.
CISO, with whoever it is, right? Even if it's a venture, a VC partner, etc. The idea there is, again, you've got 3 hours of focus time to learn about the other individual, right? It's that
Hmm.
trust that you build, right? So again, right, as much as I would love to talk shop, I fundamentally believe that you have to sort of gain the trust. You have to sort of make sure you know the other individual as a human before you talk about business. That's sort of worked really well for me, and I'll continue to go do that.
I love that. I'm a Texas boy here, and our version of that is let's go shoot clay pigeons. Like
So, fun fact,
if we can
another
hang out for an afternoon with guns and still be safe around one another, we can probably have a business
Yeah, it's a
conversation.
fun fact, Alan. Actually, I lived and went to school in Dallas, Richardson. I've got family in Austin, right? At some point, I'm
Nice.
sure, it'll be great to actually live in Texas too.
Nice. That's awesome. All right, so you know, let's talk about kind of the paradigm of startup life versus enterprise
Yeah,
life, right? I've done both, and I've got my own
yeah,
take on what the value and what the positives and negatives are of each perspective. But I think the trope is generally startup is going to require more from you up front, but has potentially this huge payoff on the back end, right? And enterprise is kind of just steady state slogging through the whatever you slog through. Not to disparage those that work in the enterprise. Slog is awfully a loaded term there. But how does that work for you, right? I know serial founders, for example. Do you see yourself kind of staying with this lifestyle? Do you believe in that bigger payoff down the road driver? Where are you at with that one?
So for me, I've been fortunate or blessed, however you want to call it, right, to be, quite successful working both in a large company or enterprise company like VMware and
Mm-hmm.
in sort of mid-sized and smaller companies and starting companies, right? I mean, again, VMware was a great foundation in terms of learning how to build a business, right? From my perspective, right? But for me, right, for me, what really the enjoyment I get is, creating a new category, creating a new market, and then scaling the business, right? The whole notion of financial payoff, right? For me, if you focus on those two things, which is meeting the customer need, building a category or building a market, and then scaling the business, the financial sort of incentives or the financial sort of payout will come. But if you focus
Yeah.
primarily on the financial payout, right, it's difficult for you to build a scalable company, the right sort of company, right? So typically what I tend to do is, what's the problem that you're trying to solve, right? How best can you solve the problem? This is where, again, design customers help us out a lot. And then
Mm-hmm.
once you get that initial feedback, how do I scale the company, scale the go-to-market, right? Just basically, all I care about is that building the company at that point in time, right? Once you
I
build the
love that.
company, look, I mean, making money will happen once if you focus on the first two.
That's almost kind of the advice we give folks, about the career in general, right? There's always
Yes,
folks that are like, "Oh, I want to go into cybersecurity because I hear it pays," and I'm always like, "That's not why to come in here. Like, that's
yeah,
not what you're here for."
exactly,
Yes, it pays, but yeah, if you don't have the heart and soul, you're gonna burn out, right?
exactly. And to be fair, right? I mean, cybersecurity. I mean, CISO's role is one of the toughest roles possible, right? You're expected to create magic day in, day out, and if things happen, it's not that forgiving, right? So I mean, again, kudos to every CISO out there, who is fighting the good fight day in, day out, with very little room for anything bad to happen, right? So that's a tough job there.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So let me ask you this. We talked about design partners a couple of
Yeah.
times now, and I want to know. And this is actually two questions because one kind of morphs into the other as you grow. But who makes a good design partner, and who makes a good advisor? And maybe even when do you start to transition from one to the other would be a really interesting question too.
Yeah, so for me, the right kind of design partners, I mean, they basically should have two key things, right? Number one is they need to sort of have the pain point, right? So the hope is that they're not helping you out, but they really, really have the pain point in their business that they're trying to solve. That's the first and
Hmm.
foremost thing, right? And the second one that you're always looking for is the design partner should be really, really forthcoming and open in terms of giving critical feedback, right? And I'll stress on the word critical feedback, right? It's
Hmm.
extremely important to get the right design partner. The first dozen customers are your design partners. They have to be very critical about what's working, what's not working, what can you enhance, right? And they should feel the
Hmm.
pain, right? Because that helps you build the right product for the broader set of enterprises, right? So that's
Yeah.
how I think about design customers. It's not about getting the best logo; it's about getting the most
Right.
the customer or the design partner who's most so they're very involved in the overall process. So that's
Yeah.
the first part of the question. Second part of the question in terms of who makes the best advisors, right? So, I mean, it'll sound like a cop out, but it depends in terms of where you're in terms of the journey of building the company, right? Early on, I at least am looking for advisors who can help you build and shape the product, right? And the point there
Hmm.
I'm trying to make is that the first dozen customers are founder led. They come from your network, you know, folks, or you sort of, 2 degrees of separation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, especially you've got to be the Kevin Bacon of cybersecurity to make that happen,
Right.
right? So that's basically the early on sort of set of advisors you need, right? Because you're purely focused on the product piece. As the company evolves, right, it's very critical to get a set of advisors who can help you scale the go-to-market, right? And so that's sort of the second shift you make in terms of the type of advisors. And just to be clear, right, you never will get away from not having product advisors. The key point I'm trying to make is don't focus on having advisors early on who will try and scale the go-to-market, right?
Hmm.
Closer to Series A is when you want to invest more and expand the advisors to include folks who can help you scale the go to market. And both, again, it's product practitioners and then go to market practitioners. Practitioners being they've done this before, right?
Well, Raj Mallempati, CEO of Blue Flag Security, thank you for coming and joining us here on Founder Stories TV. Thank you for sharing all this wisdom. This was some amazing answers to some fun questions. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Folks, if you want to learn more about Blue Flag, you can go to founderstories.tv/Blue Flag and learn more. Thank you again, Raj.
Thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure being on this show. Absolutely a great, fun conversation to talk about my journey as a founder and the CEO of Blue Flag Security.